Welcome to the Ardan Labs podcast. Our special guest today is Eleanor Berger. Oh my God, we got Eleanor on today, Kevin. People know Kevin because I say Kevin's name all the time here, but Kevin's like, "You can have Eleanor?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're getting Eleanor today." I'm like, "Yep, we've got her." And there she is. If you're on YouTube, you can see her. Hey, Eleanor, thank you for stopping by for the next hour and a half or so and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for inviting me, Bill. Really excited to be here.
Awesome. Okay. For the few people on the planet who don't know you, Eleanor, all right, just for the few, give everybody like your 2 minute spiel on sort of what you're doing today.
So, I work at Microsoft as an engineering manager at Cloud and AI Azure in a very interesting group called Growth and Innovation, and specifically working with startups and ISVs. ISV, by the way, is this funny term not everyone knows. um, Independent software vendors, basically companies that do software as their main thing, then all sorts of startups. And we kind of, our group works with them, helping them, build and scale on Azure and kind of trying to do it securely and responsibly and reliably and with all the latest and best of our technologies, but also learning from them, because it turns out this particular group of users, the startups, the software developers, they tend to be like, the early adopters, the innovators, the ones who are kind of stretching the platform to its limits. And so it's really worth paying attention to them. And so, yeah, that's a lot of fun. And I'm managing a team of engineers in EMEA, so all over Europe and also Israel and other places. And I'm sort of an engineer, developer, programmer. The name keeps changing over over the years, but it kind of means the same. I know also how to bang on the keyboard and make things happen, and it's still something I very much love.
The first time I had heard, and then obviously I realized it had to be true, that Azure, Microsoft's cloud, was really the largest cloud out of like, say, the three. Like at first my brain was like, how is Amazon sort of not number one with like almost everything that runs there? But then somebody had reminded me like all the enterprises use Microsoft, and so you've got really large companies with large deployments on Azure. And so people don't realize how big that cloud platform is.
Yeah, sure. And it's not just Azure, right? So the thing is, Microsoft Cloud, Azure is sort of the core platform, the equivalent to AWS, but there's like such a huge portfolio of different products that they all sort of come together. Um, everything from like Dynamics and the Power Platform, which is huge, kind of as a low 365. So all these things together are really pervasive. I mean, who's not using it? Like, it's all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. And then you said that you're working with startups, and that's interesting to me because anytime I think startups, I'm thinking again like Azure or Google or so. So even that is really interesting to me to see that startups are even um, leveraging that cloud. You just don't hear it every day, like on Twitter or Blue Sky or even in conferences.
No, we got a huge, huge amount of startups using Azure. I mean, you know how it is. The startups today, they have access to everything and they'll use whatever works for them. So it's our job to make sure it works really well for them. We definitely got a nice boost being kind of early to the AI game, right? And we had, I think by now you can do some AI everywhere, but we had a period of a year and some where this was the place to do AI. And as it became kind of the main or the only game in town, that got a lot of attention. But we also just try to have a great platform that people can use. And sometimes it's a bit difficult to sort of maybe get the recognition. People will use it. Maybe they don't talk about it as much as they do about the other platforms, but they're using it.
Yeah, no, I think that's the case. So if you're listening and you don't realize it, I mean, Microsoft's cloud is really like it's big, it's out there, it's being used. You just don't hear about it at all. Okay, this and we're going to get back to that. But this is a podcast about you, so I want to share your sort of journey to how you are, or how'd you get to where you are now. So a couple quick questions. Where did you grow up, and what year did you sort of graduate from grade school?
So I grew up in Tel Aviv, Israel, and yeah, I'm very uneducated. I sort of just barely finished high school in, what was it, 93, 94, and somehow quite soon after that found myself doing the software thing, and in some form or the other have been doing it since.
Nice. Okay. So Israel, 93, 94s. And I like that because that's when you're like 17, 18, right?
Yeah.
And we get also a general sense of where tech was. Okay. Now, this first question, if you've listened to a few shows, you know what's coming here. Clear your mind, clear your mind. I want that first memory you have of doing something on a computer that was like just wow.
There's so many because every time it's something new. I can think of a few sort of moments. I had an experience using Logo with a turtle when I was very young. I don't remember exactly when, but we had a computer. My mom was already into computers, and we had a computer at home, so I got some early exposure, and that was quite cool. Another, I think, really pivotal moment that literally kind of made my career and changed my life forever. And this is much later when I'm a teenager, kind of already towards the end of school. And my mom's boyfriend, now her spouse, Nimrod, very cool guy, and who really introduced me to many things. One day he came with his floppy disk. You remember? It's like little floppy disk. And what was written on it was very cryptic, VB2. And he said, "Oh, give this thing a try. It's pretty cool. You can do some of these like Windows things with buttons and stuff." And so I kind of put it in, and he showed me a few things, and that was amazing because I knew a little bit of programming. I was not kind of like one of these whiz kids. I wasn't amazing at it, but I knew a little bit. Um, with like GW Basic and did this sort of thing, Pascal, I don't know. But you can never do anything very attractive with it, right? You could
Yeah.
demonstrate that you know how to program, but it didn't look particularly exciting. And now you had this thing, and very quickly I could do apps for Windows, which was all the rage back then. We're talking kind of early 90s. And so this was an amazing experience, this instant gratification, and also experiencing myself as being able to do something that's exciting to me and exciting to others. I didn't think of this being, again, kind of something that's linked to my identity. Programming was something I kind of knew, like I knew history and maybe a little bit of math, but this was such an amazing experience, and so I continued playing with it. And so initially, I didn't expect to have like software as a vocation. At the time, my dream was to be a musician. Very childish kind of dream to be a musician, to play on stage. And the strange thing that happened is that my dream sort of came true, and I actually got some gigs playing with
So
bands.
what instrument were you
Oh,
playing
I
in high
so
school?
like yeah, it's kind of a little bit adjacent because I was playing synthesizers and samplers and things like this.
Wow.
Just as kind of electronic music was starting to happen back then. Um, but anyway, so yeah, I started having sort of a career of a musician and realized very quickly that this is going to be like a precarious life, that it's quite difficult to sort of pay the bills if this is what you do for a living, but also that it's kind of, it's not as glamorous when you think of being a musician. You think, you'll have these amazing moments in the studio where you have some inspiration and you do something completely new. But the reality is you go night after night playing exactly the same songs to some random crowd somewhere. And so I was kind of looking for a day job, to just to pay rent and things like this.
Was that before or is that after high school or during? This has to
Just
be.
after high school, kind
Yeah.
of
All right.
immediately.
So let's not go any farther than high school just yet,
All right,
because
all right,
I
all
want to
right.
get there. But your stepdad who gave you the VB2, right? He was your stepfather.
Yeah, not quite, but yeah,
Not quite.
like
Okay. Um, what did he do for a living that he had access to, Visual Basic to bring
well,
that
he
home?
was a programmer, so
Oh, he
he
was.
knew the
Okay.
stuff, and he also was kind of discovering, this really great way you can now so easily do Windows stuff.
What did your mom do for a living? What did she
I
kind
think
of
she
work
so
did she
she
do?
also did some kind of she did some programming. I think by the time I was around, she probably didn't do a lot of like coding or something like this, but she worked for DEC, the Digital Equipment Corporation. I don't know if
Oh,
you
yeah,
probably,
yeah.
I don't know
Yeah,
if you
I know
heard these
Deck.
guys
Yeah.
do. It was kind of the Pepsi to IBM's Cola. Um, and they didn't do very well. They didn't figure out the transition to PCs, and by that time in the 90s, they kind of got sold for scraps to Compaq or something like this. But they were quite big in the days of mainframes, and then like the slightly smaller mainframes. And yeah, that definitely it was in the air. And we had a computer, which not many people kind of in the 80s had a computer, and even like a real not so I had like a Sinclair Spectrum and Commodore, but we also had like a real computer with an Intel processor and MS-DOS and this kind of stuff a lot earlier than other people did. And I had this exposure that for sure made a big difference.
Do you have siblings? Did you have to compete for that computer?
No, no. So I have my father's side, but we didn't grow up together. So in my home, no, I could use it as much as I wanted. It's kind of interesting. I never got to reflect on it, but now that I think about it, the fact that my mom worked for DEC and not for IBM, for example, also had some significance. But the computer we had, so the thing about DEC, they kind of missed the PC moment. And then by the time they realized they're going to have to do a PC, they botched it by releasing a computer that was a lot like an IBM PC. It had like Intel architecture, MS-DOS, all these things, but was not compatible. It was not compatible with IBM PC. Um, that's kind of interesting because it meant that I had this computer that was quite powerful at home, but I couldn't exchange games with anyone. So this is
Mm,
what people would do, right? They like kind of trade floppy disks with games, but it wouldn't work on the computer I had at home. And so, like GW Basic was basically the only game in town.
wow. I'm Did you have dial-up internet at that point too, like 94, 93, 94? Because that's kind of when that started really.
Around that, so in Israel it came a little bit late. I guess around 94 we already had.
It sounds to me now like you're in high school. As you're in high school, music's a big thing for you. How did yeah? How did you even get into that? That I don't like that electronic music would always drive me. That what do they call it, EDM or something? Like that techno stuff. That was never like my thing. How did you get into that sort of music?
I don't know. I just was fascinated by it, and I kind of, I guess I, as a child, already learned organ or something like this. But I knew that there are such things as synthesizers and samplers, and I would go. There was like these music shops. I would keep bothering them. I'd go to the shop and like, hey, let's play a little bit with this thing. The minute like I could get kind of some money from here from there, bought a synthesizer and then another one, and now it's everything is in the computer, but back then it was a bit of an expensive hobby to get. Man, and I was just fascinated by it, how you can create these sounds that come from nowhere. It's not like this thing here and you're hitting it. It's like sound from nowhere. To me
Yeah,
it was.
that's interesting. A sound from nowhere. As a parent, I'm happy because you have headphones on. You're not disturbing me, as opposed to like I wanted to learn a trumpet. So it sounds like your first thought as you graduate high school is to just be a musician and try to. Did you have a band or was this a solo sort of venture?
No, no, I was in bands. As I said, I was kind of uncharacteristically lucky, and I think in some ways it was lucky that it came early because some people I know they were chasing this dream, well into their 30s and even later. But for me, I kind of was 17. I think I got the first opportunity to play on stage and get paid a little bit for it. And then did this for a while and then got recruited by an even bigger band. And so it looked kind of promising for a bit. But
Were
as
you
I
writing your own songs? Was the idea that you would at some point produce a record and you were writing your own
I
music?
did, although there was a bit of a disconnect in that, yeah, I was more interested in this more electronic, more abstract stuff, but what I would get kind of to sort of what I would get paid to play was a bit more mainstream.
So then, how long did you try to pursue? So you pursued that for like 10 years, from like 17 to.
No, not even. I think so. Yeah, soon after that, I kind of started jobbing in software. And for a while, it was just that. It was like 9 to 5, get a salary so that you can then evenings and weekends do music. And I think what happened is, yeah, just this musician life was kind of not very fulfilling, boring. You do the same thing over and over again. There's something a little bit kind of immature about the culture around it. Whereas in software, no day is like the previous one. It's just like this constant stream of new things to learn and new problems to solve. And it was fascinating. I just got sort of sucked into it, down the rabbit hole.
How
And
did you get that first job out of high school without needing to, say, go to university? I can't imagine that was easy. Or was it easy in 90?
I guess I had chutzpah. It was also like I probably can't do it today, but it was the 90s and everyone like demand was so high and there was very little supply of people who could do it. So I remember I didn't actually know what I'm going to do. I just knew that I needed a job. And back then it was still in newspapers, like you'd buy a
Yeah,
paper, there'll be some
classifieds in the newspaper.
exactly. And I saw all the classifieds, they're all looking for Visual Basic programmers. So I was
It was
like,
a VB programming job.
yeah, I was like, yeah, I
Wow.
can do that. I know how to do that. I never thought anyone would pay me for this, but they say they would. And so I went and knocked on doors, and eventually someone told me, like, okay, just prove to us that you actually know how to do it, which I did very easily. And they were like, yeah, you're hired.
Wow. Do you remember how much you got paid for that first job? Was it like $15 an hour? Was it a.
I don't remember. I just remember for a while, the first few years, it was a lot less than probably I deserved. Because I didn't really know what the market is like, and but it was a lot more than anyone I knew was making because all the people I knew were like, yeah, musicians straight out of high school working in kind of mech jobs. And so I was always like, 5 times richer than anyone else around me. But
making more money than you knew what to do with, but you're
yeah,
still living at home at the time.
yeah, I didn't negotiate very well. I didn't know kind of, but it all kind of went pretty quickly, and I did one job and then another one, and kind of with time got more confidence. So yeah, it sort of became my profession.
That's amazing. What did your mom and her husband? He must have been real proud of you when you got that VB job, like
I
because he
don't know.
introduced you
I
to
hope
it.
so. I think so. I have no idea actually. I definitely know that they're proud of me now, but not sure.
It would be like a fun conversation to have with them
Yeah.
next time, to like kind of reminisce back then. So how long were you at that first job? So you got that job when you were like 17, 18.
Yeah, and I did I think for a while I was changing a job every year because I was
You never thought about university? That was never something that was on the table or pushed by
we'll
anyone?
get there. I did years later, but at that point, no, it didn't occur to me, and I was yeah kind of all the time busy with doing stuff, and after a while. I left the country, I moved to Germany, which was a very exciting time. And also ended up being kind of quite a big moment for me in software because quite accidentally, that's when I discovered Linux and open source. And this really changed a lot for me. This was like completely accelerated my
So
descent down the rabbit hole.
did you you have to did you end up you have to do your 2 years of service, right?
I didn't. No, I was quite, I would say, maybe a mess. I don't know how you'd call it. I was an ordinary life back then.
I didn't know you could get out of that. I thought that was mandatory.
I don't know if it was more like I didn't want it or they didn't want me, but it's going to happen.
That's funny. So talk to me about Germany, because how does an opportunity in Germany sort of come across your desk there?
Yeah, so I moved to Berlin. It was already kind of, I guess, 97, 98, something like this, late 90s. Very exciting.
So you're
Berlin
like
back.
what, 21, 22?
Yeah, something like this.
I love Berlin. I went to Berlin and I wanted to move there. There's something magical about that city. I don't know what it is.
It's very different now because now it's like a proper kind of world capital. Back then, it was still kind of recovering from all the strangeness of the years of separation. It was a bit rough, but a very exciting time. And as it happened, I did the same. Got there, I needed the job, knocked on doors, told people like, yeah, I know how to do this stuff. Back then, it was like, yeah, Delphi became big. I used to do Delphi and
The
Ball.
Pascal, yeah, the visual Pascal,
Yeah.
essentially.
And I got a job, and the first day on the job, they told me, "Oh yeah, and here, like, this is your login to the Linux server where we kind of run the database." And I was like, "Damn, I don't, I, like, this sounds scary. I never did this stuff." Uh, but I managed to learn, and there was the internet, right? And there was IRC and mailing list, and it opened a completely new world to me. It was very
Wow.
exciting.
How long were you at that company, that first company in Germany?
I think it was almost 2 years after this. I had moved on to the States for a while, but
But what were you building in Germany? What was the product or the work that you were doing there?
I was building software for managing medical laboratories.
Wow.
So they had basically, you have all these machines in laboratories that collect like blood samples or other fluid samples and get sort of data out of them. And you need to, part of it is just a standard thing of database and storing it and retrieving it, but a lot of it was also um, you need to kind of ensure, this was very before people talked about data science and these things, but at least like it was the first kind of touch I had with having to make sure that the data is reliable because these machines sometimes they produce very odd
It
results.
ran on prem, right? This wasn't a cloud solution yet. This
No, no,
or
nothing.
this had to run on prem. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which was always fun when there were bugs, because it was just like, which site is having a problem? Get me this, get me that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
you need to get on a bus and go there and get.
Yeah, in the 90s when I was doing dev, we had a big call center solution. But that was running all, like, people would install that in India. We'd have to send somebody there, and then it was always this, and then you had multiple versions running if you had enough clients, because you always had somebody who didn't want to upgrade because it was fine, right? And so, like, software management, I felt, was a little more complicated back then, in terms of you really had to make sure that you could support any version of software that was running on prem, anywhere. When the cloud came, and I was like, wait, I can have one version. That's all I have to deal with. I was like, yeah. So you got to experience some of that too. Yeah. So then what led you out of there? So you do 2 years there. You're getting a lot of experience with Linux, dealing with on-prem, debugging, maintaining, managing, releasing.
Yeah, that was very cool. So, I mean, it was very intense period. I mean, also when you're young and teens and everything is crazy. And partying hard, working hard, everything kind of really amazing. Like you live a lifetime in a couple of years.
Did you have flatmates there, or you were able to get your own sort of
I lived in this apartment at some point. We were like 15 people there, I think.
15 people?
Man, it was,
Young in ignorance, right? Young and like I always say it, man. Ignorance is bliss. You just didn't.
I know, well, it is. If you survive, and as you can see, I did. Not everyone. Like some people, this was very brutal, but I did survive and learned a lot. And yeah, and in terms of kind of, it was so exciting to learn not just Linux, but like one day I asked, okay, so like how do I edit files? And people told me there's this thing is called Emacs. So I open Emacs and I have no idea what this thing does, but it has a tutorial. So you do the tutorial, and then it tells you this thing is running Lisp. So like, okay, well, I knew that there is a thing called Lisp, but I had no idea what it is, so I had to learn it. And boom, like the next few years of my life, I was obsessed with Lisp. It's really kind of amazing, especially when you're making your first steps and you're learning about software and about computer science. This was an amazing experience.
Parentheses didn't drive you crazy because the parentheses in that language, I had the hardest time with that language in uni.
I don't know if today I could have gotten used to it, but back then I was like clay, like you could do anything with my brain. And so got interested in it, and so I got myself into it, and I learned Emacs Lisp and Common Lisp and Scheme. Scheme especially I liked a lot. Now I don't use it because yeah, it's kind of hard to read. It's nice to write, it's very hard to read.
Yeah.
So but it's very good education to learn this.
Here at Ardan Labs, we believe in empowering companies to reach their full potential through innovative technology solutions. Trusted by small startups and Fortune 500 companies alike, we specialize in high-performance software consulting, training, staffing, development, and now AI. With over 14 years of experience, Ardan Labs has trained over 30,000 engineers and served over 1,000 companies worldwide. Whether you're mastering Go, Rust, Kubernetes, Terraform, or blockchain, we're your strategic partner for performance-grade solutions. Let's elevate your tech journey together. Reach out to Ardan Labs today.
So you're there for 2 years, and then what happens? So now it's like 97, 98. It's almost year 2000 at this point. So you're dealing
Exactly.
with Y2K issues now, right? This is it, Y2K.
I don't know. Y2K was this kind of, it's like we have it now with like this AI doomerism. Like I read about it, but I have no awareness that it's a real thing. Uh, Partly maybe because I was working on computer systems that were relatively modern. Like definitely it wasn't an issue in the systems I was working on. But yeah, kind of as we just around the time of the millennium, the States to New York City, I had Berlin was very intense. So at some point it was too much, and just when it was getting too much, I got an opportunity to join a startup like a .com. Like this was still the fumes of the .com bubble, and again, who would hire me? No education, no experience, but there's no one else to hire. So they hired me to be their
What was
lead.
the job for? Programming what? What was
Yeah.
the
So what we
tech stack?
did was kind of like Uber Eats, but like 2 decades earlier. So the same idea. You can order stuff to eat from restaurants. Um, which just it's a good lesson here. Sometimes there are good ideas and it's not the right time because
Yeah.
just the logistics of it were impossible. So we had really nice software which I somehow managed to build and even get a few other people to join us and do, but it was very difficult to get it to sort of take off as a business because yeah, just the logistics of it. It was very difficult to convince restaurants to start working with a computer to deliver food. Like,
My first business was sort of ahead of its time too, and it was great tech, but when you have to start educating people, it gets expensive. The Apples of the world can educate anybody. They can change the haptics tomorrow and everybody will learn it, right? But when you're a small startup, it's too much of a burden to try to also teach people something new.
It is, yes. But it kind of ended up okay because what they realized it was the founders, they were like these pretty shrewd business people. And they realized that there is a niche. There is um, which is ordering food at companies, the sort of thing where they give people a perk to order lunch. And they always are a little bit kind of finding it difficult to manage the expenses and things like this, the receipts. And so turned out this is a pretty good exit, and it finished out like I think it still exists actually. Like it got sold to like a private equity company and sort of soft exited as a solution for companies ordering and expensing food for their employees. And I sort of finished this again, very
But how
intense.
did you find that job from Germany? And when you told your mom you were moving to the States, I'm kind of curious.
No, I think actually it was from I don't remember. I think it was through her, through a connection. It was just a crazy time. Um, I think people find it hard to imagine right now because now if you go and like you're looking for a job, you could apply to like hundreds of jobs and some will not reply and others will put you through all kind of tests and things like this. Back then, the demand was so much more than the supply that if anyone just heard that someone knows how to like bang on the keyboard and get something just half working, you'd get the opportunity. So it was, yeah, I don't think something like this could happen to me or to someone like me today, but it was pretty wild back then.
And what was the conversation like when you're telling your family you're going to the States? It was good. Like,
I think I asked for
maybe you didn't even say anything. You're just, hey, mom, I'm in New York. But New York's expensive. So, I mean, like, what was your living situation there?
it was pretty sweet. I made, I think, again, more money than I ever seen in my life, and probably a lot less than I was worth. But yeah, I lived in this like really nice place in Brooklyn, and this was not a problem. It was very intense, very hard work. I was actually quite miserable some of this time because I didn't get to, in some ways, I think, have this very leisurely life that you have as a young person. But financially, it was very good for me, and eventually, kind of went out, walked away from this with a bunch of money that kind of supported me for a few years. So
Did you know
that
anybody in New York at the time? Or you were like kind of alone?
so yeah, so I moved there with a partner, and we met some people, but for a lot of this time, I was kind of working 7 days a week, morning till
Wow.
night. So that's
Startup
what,
life.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So you're there for a couple years and then you just got burnt out after all of that, or another better opportunity comes along?
No, so then I'm kind of this ended, and I'm exhausted and really quite
Yeah, because you
miserable.
cashed out there. That's right.
And
You
I cashed
sold
out.
that, right?
It's quite a lot of money in the bank, like enough that I could like not work for a while. And then I figured out like, oh, this this formal education thing. Maybe I should be doing this. And now I have the time, I have the money. Maybe I should do that.
But why were you thinking maybe I should do that? Because you've done really well up to this point without the formal
Yeah, I
education.
don't I don't know. I think today I have some models how to think about these things. But back then I was just young and confused, and I was like, I would get one idea after the other, and I'd try to pursue it as you do. And I got yeah, I was interested in Lisp and then in artificial intelligence and then in language, which is funny, kind of now coming back to it. It's again central in my life, but back then was way too early. But I thought I should study linguistics. That's the thing you need to know if you're interested in cognition and AI. And so I moved to London. I managed to get into a pretty good university to do a
Gosh,
degree.
you've lived everywhere. You lived in Germany, we're back to the
I
States.
know,
Now
I've
you're
been
living
all
in
over the
London.
place. I
That's
know.
amazing.
And but yeah, so I found myself studying, and it was so boring. It was just like the pace of things was so much slower than what I'm used to. So I lasted like a year, and after this I realized like, yeah, this thing where I'm like Linux, open source, this like a lot more fun. I don't think this is for me. And since then I learned a lot, and I'm doing kind of everything I can to continue learning, but it was
Yeah, too slow for you. You need the information coming at you
I think
twice as fast.
partly it's too slow. There's another thing which is it's kind of it's upside down. So the way I learn, and it's just so happened because of the story I just told you about how I got into things, is I solve the next problem. So there's like a problem, and I'm like, damn, I don't know how to solve this, but maybe I can figure it out. And then you do something, and through this you discover new things. Whereas the formal education system is more about now you kind of learn all these things so that maybe one day in the future you'll be able to solve a problem. And I'm just not wired like this. Maybe it's too late for me.
You know, one of my oldest stepdaughter, who's 17, is now applying to uni, and she's only looking at engineering programs that are basically hands-on. And there's these programs now like Georgia Tech and Notre Dame St. Mary's and Rochester Institute of Technology. They have these specific engineering programs now where you might have a semester in the classroom, but a lot of it is practical use and then say internships. And I think that's what you would have needed at the time to be more hands on instead of
Yes, there's something very
just book.
motivating about like doing something and kind of experiencing yourself as being able to, you know, grapple with a problem and then solve it and then move on to the next one. It's a very positive experience, in my opinion.
So you try to do that year of uni. It's just for whatever reason it's not your thing. So now you got to get back into the job market, right? That's
Yes,
got to
and
be your
again, I
plan.
got incredibly lucky. Basically, my whole career is like a chain of unlikely and undeserved luck. And
You
I'm
got to
really
be good. I had an 8th grade teacher that would beat me in ping pong every day. And every day he would say to me, I would say to him, I say him, you got lucky. He goes, Bill, you got to be good to get lucky. Got to be good to get lucky. So, Eleanor, you're going to call it luck, but you have to be good to have that.
yes. So yeah, after a while, so for a while, I kind of was just enjoying myself, doing lots of open source stuff and traveling a bit and partying quite a lot. And at some point, I got an opportunity to join a company. It's very cool. It was called L Shift. It doesn't exist anymore. They got acquired by a larger consultancy a few years back, but it was a very cool place.
Was that in
Um,
London?
it was in London, yeah.
And what year is that now? We're talking
We're talking
2004 maybe?
2003 or something like this.
2003, 2004. Okay.
And it was amazing. Again, very lucky. I don't know, maybe they were nice to me, maybe they thought I'm amusing. I got to work with people, all of them far smarter and more better educated and more experienced than me, and be kind of the the least smart person in the room, which is something I've come to really like. I'm very comfortable with it, and I think it's a wonderful thing to be somewhere where you just learn from people.
What
And
was
I've been,
the what were you
yeah.
solving there? What were you working on in your
So
tech
we're doing
stack
like
there?
bespoke software development for whatever London. So like some banks, some retail companies, all sorts of things. Just kind of the more, let's say, harder projects that would sort of outsource to us. And yeah, and I learned so much. It was amazing. I think I was there for like 4 years, maybe even longer, and it was just
Wow.
an amazing opportunity to learn. And
That's
I
your
think
longest stint to date, 4 years. Like that's a long time.
is it? Yeah, I
Yeah,
suppose it is. Yeah, no,
yeah.
I've worked at other places for long, but yeah, something like this, and it was yeah, it was pretty amazing experience. A lot of fun. I really learned a lot. So I think I came into it knowing how to get something working, but at this point, I would say, okay, I already could say, yeah, I'm a developer, engineer, whatever it is you call these things now. I understand how these things work. I have some models to work with, some heuristics, bag of tricks. So yeah, this was really great.
I would say that you went into this job as a programmer and came out an engineer after four or
Yeah,
five
that that
years.
that that,
Yeah.
that would be. I still find it, even though it's in my title, I find it very strange that people call us engineers. To me, engineers are these people who, they like build bridges and stuff like this. Playing with invented stuff, with software, with kind of digital fiction. But yeah, definitely kind of this was an important experience in getting me to do, software in the large kind of scaled projects.
Now, I think at some level, because software is so virtual and fluid, that designing architectures and structures that could be maintained over time across many different people is a real engineering sort of practice struggle, right? How do
It's
you how do you design project structures and architectures and keep people? I think it's a challenging engineering. That's the word. That's where I apply engineering, not in writing the if statement. Like right, that's the programming side. But how do you structure big projects and architect and style and all that stuff?
yes, yeah, I can see that.
So then you do your 4 or 5 years there. Now we're talking, where are we at now? Almost 2007, 8. I lost track a little bit.
Like
Yeah.
this.
And then what
And yeah,
happened? So you're still, yeah, now you're in London for a decent time, almost a decade.
no, I've been here for a while. And yeah, and again, I got super lucky. Um, and Ubuntu was happening. I was very excited about Ubuntu. Was using it as my main software and was kind of a little bit involved in the community. And Canonical, Mark Mark Shuttleworth's company, that's kind of the financial backer of it, was looking for people to join and work on some of the infrastructure for it. Really? Me? I get to work. And but yeah, they hired me and I got to work with some amazing people. Basically the who and who of open source and of the Debian and Python communities, and worked on Launchpad, which was kind of like a little bit, let's say, a precursor to GitHub. It was this kind of hub for managing open source code, and it was much more oriented towards building a distribution. So linking the repositories and the projects to packages that you build as Debian and Ubuntu are these like gigantic trees of packages. It was a bit primitive in comparison to what we have now with GitHub, but it was pretty cool for the time. And it was an amazing experience for me. Again, I was in most cases like the least smart, least experienced, least accomplished person in the room, which I think was a great place to be because I continued learning and having lots of fun.
When I started learning Go in 2013, I was meeting people that were I think Dave Cheney was there. Gustavo, I can't remember his last name, but I was meeting amazing people that were
Gustavo,
working.
I know. Yeah, we worked together. Yeah, a lot of them moved to Go early. We did um, a lot of Python, and then at some point, in any way, many people Go was supposed to be like an easy thing for people doing C++, but it ended up being the way for Python programmers to do systems. So a lot of people moved from Python to Go, and including lots of people at Canonical.
You said you worked with Gustavo or you worked with Dave or both?
Yeah, there were, I mean, when I joined, it was not so many people. By now, it's a pretty huge company, but yeah, we worked on the same team for a while.
That's amazing. That's that. So that means that you had to be there for a good 7, 8, 9 years. You must have spent
No,
a
no,
decent
I
amount of
was
time.
there for 3 years. I left
Well,
at
3 years. Okay.
2010. I left.
You left at 2010. Okay. All right. So then what happened? You were there for 3 years, but you got to work remote basically from
We
London.
were working remotely before it was cool, right? So we didn't
Yeah.
have video calls. We were on IRC. At some point, Skype became available for voice calls. And so we'd do from time to time a voice call. We'd fly and do like a sprint together a few times a year.
Yeah. That's like the real beginnings of it. That had to be real challenging with distributed teams without all that real. Did you at least, were there moments where everybody got together somewhere on the planet?
We'd get like a few times a year to sprint together or to, because it's kind of all around the open source community. There'll be conferences. So you'd sort of do something
Um,
around the conference before or after, things like this.
so now what happens? You do 3 years there. I mean, at that time, that was like a really good company to be working at. So
Yeah,
something really amazing must have came across your desk, I think.
yeah, cloud happened. So one really cool experience again. I mean, I learned a lot at Canonical. A lot of good things came from me being there, but one good thing that came from being there is when AWS just started, and it was still not very popular. Mark Shuttleworth, who's a really smart guy, obviously, said, "All right, you all get $100 a month to spend on this thing. Do something. Tell us what it's good for." And so I got pretty early exposure to that, and we did all kind of cool things because we realized like it was all about building these distributed systems. We had at the time we like collocated data centers and things like this. It was obviously going to be useful for something, but very quickly it became clear how powerful this is. And so after I left, I kind of realized everyone is going to need to do this. And this is a good time to go and help them. It was also after the financial crisis. All of a sudden, everyone wanted to become more efficient and save money. So I started doing consulting, and again, was kind of a lot more lucky or successful than
How'd
I
you
even.
get your first client? Because it's easy to say I want to do consulting, but it's that first client that's the hardest sort of client to
It
get.
was really easy at the time. Again, okay, maybe I keep saying this was easy. I got lucky. This was easy. I got lucky. Probably I did a few things right, but I think mostly what I did is I was focused on something that was in high demand and had very limited supply at the right time. So, if we're talking like 2010, if people looked for someone who knows how to do cloud, DevOps, these things that are now very common, there was no one. And so it just wasn't very difficult to find opportunities, and I got to work for fairly large companies, for banks, for
But
whatnot.
how are you making contact with these people? Like you're not going to meetups? Is it all online, IRC?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
what is
definitely.
your mechanic for getting introduced to the people that hold the purse strings?
There are markets for this, especially in London, which is kind of huge. So that people would advertise what they're looking for, or you'd know someone from the previous gig, and they'll kind of tell you, hey, everyone's looking at whatever this bank or this company. They're looking for people to help. Why don't you see if you can help with a project?
I feel like some of that has gotten harder over the last few years of sort of connecting with people and companies that need that kind of help.
Do
And
you
I feel
think
like you're making it sound like it was, back in 2012, 13, it was maybe a little easier. But I find that especially since COVID, it's with meetups going away and things, it's
I
been
think
hard.
partly things are become like so. One thing is everything is becoming more efficient. I think when you have efficient markets, it kind of it depresses a little bit the opportunities people have, right? Because you're always kind of close to the equilibrium. Whereas when markets are not very efficient, if you are opportunistic enough and if you're daring enough, there are all kind of like, all kind of opportunities you can exploit. The other thing is, I think there are these phases of technological development. So, for example, cloud, DevOps, containerization, all these things. There was some time where there was just so much demand and not enough people. Now it's pretty common. Like most people you interview, they know enough to sort of do useful work, and so that you don't get a lot of extra advantage from mastering these technologies. Now it's a new thing. Then it was for a while like data science and these things. Now data science, there's so many people out there that they're looking for a job and no one would hire them because we trained so many people thinking that there'll be unlimited demand, but there's not unlimited demand. There's a lot of demand. So I think, yeah, you do need a bit of a nose to kind of understand what's the current wave just a little bit before it becomes something that's obvious to everyone else. And I suppose this is something I was a bit good at. Not always by intention, but just because these were the things I was curious about.
So how long are you how long are you a consultant at this point? 13, you go into consultancy.
So from like 2010, I think I also left London. I did enough of that. I was there for 12 years already. And I also was sort of a bit fascinated by startups, which I haven't done for a long time by now. I did a short stint back in Israel. I was curious to see if it would be interesting to live there. And obviously, there's the thriving startup scene there. And so I worked at a startup there doing the DevOps and cloud thing. It was cool, exciting. Didn't like so much living there. But then I moved here to Switzerland, where I live now. Joined another startup. Again, very nice experience doing mostly kind of cloudy DevOpsy things. But at this point, I'm more and more doing management. So now my job is I manage people. I write code as a hobby, and most of the time I spend kind of supporting other people, and so that
Did
became
you
central.
did you enjoy that transition into management, or did it scare you, or have you ever been reserved about it? Just
It
because
is.
kind of like your programming skills is like your life jacket, right? If world world comes to an end and you start to most people start to lose their skill set when they move into a management role.
I don't think I lost my skill set, but it's partly because I keep doing it. I think it didn't scare me enough. It should have scared me more. I was just kind of, I was a bit, I think the way I saw it is I know better than everyone else, but no one's letting me run the show. What's going on here? I need to get this management job so finally I can do things my way. And I didn't realize that's not at all how it works. I think initially I was a terrible manager and I learned. But just like initially I was a terrible programmer and I only knew how to do some simple things, and with time I learned what actually works. And I think by now I'm half decent. I learned how you can actually support people, grow a team, but it didn't come natural to me at all. And I should have been more scared, but for some reason I wasn't.
It's definitely a learned skill. I think I'm very good at it now, but the first time I became a manager, like one person wanted to quit after a week. And that was like a really big warning sign in my head, like, okay, Bill, stop. Like, this the way you're behaving isn't going to work, right? But it takes time. You need people around you that put you in that position to have patience with you because you're going to make mistakes. And instead of that turning into we're firing you from this, it's teaching moments because I don't know how else you're going to get better at it.
Yeah, I needed people to be honest with you, right? You need some people to kind of tell you, hey, this thing that wasn't cool. That's not how I want to be managed. And luckily, I also had these people who just wanted to quit and were frustrated, but I also had a few people who were willing to say, like, look, I can see the value of what you're trying to do here, but not like this. And luckily I was kind of open enough to learn it.
Yeah. I love that. Sometimes you don't know that you're misbehaving, I'll say it that way, until somebody says it to you. And if you're somebody like me who wants to improve, I'm not going to double down. I want to improve. And those hard conversations are really important. So now you're in Switzerland. You're back in startup world. It's like now what, 2014, 15?
Yeah, no, yeah, kind of. I guess we get to like 2017. After a while, I took a bit of a break. I was really excited by what's happening in deep learning and machine learning in general. I was like, I just
What
need
did you
to.
see or what did you read in 2017 that sort of put that back on your radar? Because honestly, I think I started seeing it in 16 and 17 as well. And I have a friend, Daniel Whitenack, who's deep in it now. But I kind of like, what did you see around that time?
So yeah, 2012 was AlexNet. It was the first time where like, yeah, they actually did something that works at or even better than human level with neural networks. And for a while, it was like, okay, kind of curiosity, interesting news, but I don't know if this is going to develop into something. But then I started reading about people actually doing it, like getting a machine with a GPU and training something and getting some results, and it looked like this may be the direction. This is how we're gonna get to actual AI. And so I just thought it's amazing, and I got to understand it well enough. I realized, I'm don't have a PhD, but hardly have a high school diploma. But I can probably by then I realized that I'm pretty good at learning things, and I could probably learn enough if I gave it a try. And so I took some time and just completely dedicated myself to this and reading and doing all kind of experiments and courses and whatnot, and got good enough that I could do some stuff. I didn't really know what to do next. It was clear that I'm never going to get a job as like a machine learning engineer because but still it wasn't at the level where people who finished like a PhD in one of the best universities. But again, luck somehow played a role, and one day someone from Google called and said, hey, we're really looking for people to join us here in Zurich in Google Cloud. How about you come and interview? For me, this was super exciting. First of all, obviously Google is such a cool company. I never thought of myself as someone who could work in one of these jobs because I still thought of myself as this kid who's doing something with Visual Basic too, and like is not a real developer because I don't have education. And I
You have like that imposter syndrome going in.
yeah, totally. So for me, imposter syndrome is like I have, but a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome as a negative thing. Is this, but for me, it's like an aspirational thing. It's like something I embrace. It's like, yeah, I don't know nothing, but maybe I can learn a little bit if I give it a try. And if I get the opportunity, which I did again and again. So I got a job at Google, joining Google Cloud, managing a bunch of amazing engineers. I've been there for 4 years. Again,
Which
then,
products were you working on? What products were you managing people on at Google?
the Google Cloud Platform, where mostly
Oh,
I
the
worked
platform.
on the stuff that's kind of the infrastructure bits. So a lot of Kubernetes was involved a lot in a thing called Antos, which was their version of like Kubernetes but running on prem, but also managed a lot of engineers doing things that I couldn't do myself, which is also a good experience to have because you need to let go and trust them. Some brilliant people.
So you got hired for your ab- ability to manage technical people and engineers with the sort of engineering background you had.
Yes, I got hired as a manager. Although at Google, they kind of that's a cool thing I like about Google. It's not an all at all companies, but you kind of need to be good enough to do you need to go through the same technical tests that other people go, and that's a good filter. You don't have managers who have no clue what their team is doing. But I definitely am had to manage people who were in disciplines that I don't have a lot of experience, like I don't know, networking, security things where I know a little bit, but I'm definitely not an expert.
You know enough to be dangerous. That's what I always say. There's things like networking where I know enough to be dangerous, but
Yeah, but if you know enough to be dangerous in networking and security, then you're really dangerous.
yeah, just enough to be dangerous, but not enough to ever call myself an expert, right? All right, so you do 4 years there at Google. You're managing teams of people that are working on cloud infrastructure. It's a great gig. I mean, you could be there for the rest of your career and grow. But you decide now, in what year is it then? One,
22,
or two?
I defect to Microsoft.
You defect. How
Yeah,
does that
Google.
job? So many people bounce between Google, Microsoft. It's not a lot of people bounce back over to Amazon, but I see a lot of Google, Microsoft flow.
I think it's interesting because there are a lot of commonalities, obviously, especially if you work at cloud. I mean, these are huge companies, they do all kind of things, but if you work at cloud, there are some commonalities. At the same time, it's very different companies, so it's good to spend some time here and sometimes there. You learn very different ways of doing things. So I've been at Google. Google is kind of you learn this thing of like how everything can be an engineering problem, right? Like and everything you can engineer until it's kind of near perfect. Microsoft is a very different place, right? Because it's all about the people coming together and very kind of recombining in all sorts of different ways, very dynamically, sort of the multi-matrix organization where you can work with anyone in the company if you have an idea and it's not too tightly managed. There are advantages and disadvantages to both approaches, but it's good experience. You learn a lot from it. And the other
I mean,
thing, yeah, go
I've
ahead.
never worked at either company, but the people that I know that have worked at these companies and the interactions I've had, I've always thought of Google as this highly academic sort of company. Like everything is done at some academic scale, whether it's the debate you're going to have, the things you got to write up, the you can't use feelings over there at all, right? It's got to be data driven. And on the Microsoft side, I've always felt it was a much more practical approach to things. That from an outsider interacting, uh, I mean, that's how I see these two companies.
Yeah, I understand why you see it that way. I'm not sure I would describe it exactly that way, but yeah, but I think Google does things with precision, which is amazing, it's impressive, it's very good education. Like you really learn how to do something that's like beginning to end perfect. You can't go wrong. Well, never perfect, right? Because the philosophy is you have error rate and you can have it can be 0.999995 perfect. That's good enough, but it will be that. Whereas at Microsoft, it's all kind of about creativity and kind of what is the next thing we can do and how can we. It's extremely adaptive. At Google, it's very difficult to change things, right? Because once you build a perfect system, now tweaking it.
It's
Not so
perfect.
not so simple. Microsoft, you could like reinvent everything tomorrow morning with a bunch of people you didn't even know yesterday. And that's, I think, what makes this company so powerful and still so successful after so many years.
So, what was the job that was offered to you? Or first, how did you find out about that job? And then what was the job?
Got poached, like I got someone one day. I think probably my name. So like someone I knew from Google moved there, and I guess maybe he gave my name, but I just got contacted one day and they asked like, "Hey, this is what we do. It's close enough to what I did before at Google, also a bit different. Do you want to interview?" At the time, I just heard the news of the OpenAI deal. And I thought, oh, that's going to be the place to be. Microsoft is where it's going to happen. No one expected it. I thought Google is where it's going to happen, the AI moment.
So they
But
weren't talking about Gemini at the time, even internally at
no,
Google?
not back at the
Oh.
time. I remember I used to, it was academic, yeah. Like I used to go and kind of bother the Google Brain people, and they said like, yeah, we're doing research. No one's going to ever use it in a practical application because it's not ready yet. It's not perfect. But then I heard about Microsoft signing the deal with OpenAI. I felt like, yeah, that's actually a good opportunity because that's where AI is going to happen. And so again, it was a pretty good bet. But also I thought it would be a good change of scenery. Yeah, I moved there, and indeed AI happened, and everything changed.
So last year, I had an opportunity to work with Daniel Whitenack on a new company that he started called Prediction Guard, which is all basically providing AI infrastructure for security, everything else that I could say, right? Like, you know what that deal is. I've been like sort of heads down learning, leveraging Go, right? How to build these AI apps that are going to leverage LLMs and all that. And I've learned it, but I've come to a conclusion that um, the everything is HTTP based, right? Like the lift in building an app at this point has become almost no different than calling any other API, right? And so, and I think that's a good thing. It's basically now become an API. It's just you have a API that can do different things. And now I just start to wonder how much technical knowledge do you need to be able to start, right? Because you keep talking about I got into this and suddenly there was a demand for it, and I got into this and suddenly there was a demand for it, and I thought there's going to be a demand for AI LLM developers to build all these apps, and now I'm starting to wonder if there's even going to be that demand because everybody's automated everything already.
It's very interesting what you say. I think so it's deceiving. And I think that's actually right now is the moment to do this shift. And I see how hard it is for me, how hard it is to some of the people I work with, and how many people are missing what's actually going on. So yeah, it's deceiving. You think, oh, it's just an HTTP call, it's a REST call. There's nothing new here. Sure, that's true. But the thing is, that's just the beginning because then you have this very strange device. Sure, it's like a function that gets a string and returns a string. So you could say, I know that. Nothing special here. But operates in a very strange way, slightly unpredictable, difficult to tame, but also incredibly powerful, right? So the models we have now are believable. And learning how to work with them is fundamentally different from everything we knew about software. It's just very different, and there are aspects of what we learned kind of from data science, how to work with something and kind of you know keep track of how it's working and measure it, evaluate things, do things methodically. That's very important. And I think a lot of the people coming to AI from application development they're sometimes missing this background. At the same time, the people coming to modern kind of generative AI from data science, they're missing what it's like to do application development and just making REST requests and iterating and kind of improving it progressively. So yeah, it is exactly this moment where there's like a new thing that you get a lot of alpha from getting just a little bit better at it right now.
I When we're done here, I want you to go to ardanlabs.ai. I spent 6 months last year building a Connect 4 game where you play against an LLM. And I don't remember what else. I'd have to look again. It's been a while, but you should check that out because it's just fun to play. But trying to figure out how to get an LLM to play a game and be smart about it was super challenging.
It's nothing like programming other programs, right? It's like it's completely different material.
Yeah, learning how to work with vector databases and learning how to prompt that thing appropriately and and every LLM is a little different. So if I want to switch the LLM, I got to tweak things again. And but a lot of my experience right now comes from sort of spending time building that on and off from the summer last year. So you might enjoy it because you're in that space and it's just sort of fun. Uh, so that's where 6 months ago I said I better learn some of this stuff because I think it's going to be being leveraged in a lot of apps. But I still don't know how many people know how to best utilize it yet. And now with this, I hate the word agent. They've totally put baggage around this word agent now, right? My God, it's horrific what the industry's done here. But yeah, I think 2025 is going to be an interesting year for application development with LLMs. And I think by the end of the year, we're going to know what these LLMs are really providing and what they're not in terms of enhancing application usability.
Yeah, it's also, it's very fast moving. I think partly it is, yeah, I share your frustration and bewilderment with this agent story, but I think partly what's happening is in past kind of transitions, they happen a lot slower. And so there was some time for the technical people, for the geeks, for the engineers to figure out what it's all about before it becomes a marketing concern. So by the time, we had to go and sell it and market it, we could tell them like, no, this is what this thing does and this is how it works. But now things are happening too quickly, and so marketing are already there saying like, yeah, we're doing agents and it will be like the best thing since sliced bread. And we're like, we still don't know how this works, what to do with it. We're still figuring it out.
You know what drives me crazy? Every time somebody says they're with some AI company, I go to their website, I go to their homepage, and I still have no idea what they do. That drives me absolutely crazy because if you can't convey to me on your homepage what you do, then I don't even think you know sort of what you do. And that just drives me crazy.
Other than that, I would say I think the best AI companies are the ones who don't talk at all about AI. Right? They're the ones who just tell you, we do this thing, look, it works. Don't we don't have to tell you like what library or what model we use to implement it. We tell you what functionality we have, how we're going to deliver value to you. And there are such companies, but I think every time you see kind of a lot of marketing speak about AI, you kind of think they probably don't know what they're doing yet, right?
I don't know. And then they got a list of companies that are using them for something, and my brain's like, I've been building this stuff for the last 6 months. I have no idea what you're trying to provide. Like, it's insanity to me right now. So I'm prepared for it because I expect my clients to want to leverage. Right? It's almost like in 22, I decided I needed to learn blockchain, only because I'm in Miami and I kept meeting 18-year-olds that were trying to tell me how computers work and blockchains work, and I was tired of being ignorant in front of these kids. So I spent 6 months building a reference blockchain in Go, so I could know this stuff. And then I thought maybe there's companies out there that will want to leverage this, and that never happened because there's no real practical sort of use case for it beyond money supply. At least that's what I've seen. So I'm in the same boat now. I've entrenched myself with this AI LLM stuff. I've entrenched myself in managing and being able to all that stuff because there's going to be a client that wants to do it. But I still haven't found one use case yet from a client that I thought was truly practical for whatever their product and services were just yet. I'm not saying it isn't going to happen. I just haven't necessarily found it yet.
Bill, there's something interesting here, and I think that's kind of in a way, as we get to kind of start summarizing this story we told here, is maybe an important lesson, which is if you go and do the stuff that's fascinating to you, that's fun, that just sort of tickles your curiosity, there will be opportunities. And if you're trying to optimize, to beat the market, maybe that doesn't work as well because you're usually going to be too late. So just have fun. Just figure out like, yeah, I also was fascinated by blockchain and spent some time kind of learning these things and writing, and maybe something will come out of it. I don't know, but it doesn't matter because I had fun.
Yeah, I agree. And I and I say this to people, maybe I'm not even listening to my own sort of lessons. Find the things that you're passionate about. I had a friend one time. It was pre-COVID, and every time I'd see her in San Francisco, we'd be walking, talking, and she'd beat herself up over not learning Kubernetes. This was like 2017, 2018. And every time I go to San Francisco and we hang out, she'd beat herself up over not learning Kubernetes. And I finally looked at her one day and I said, if you wanted to learn Kubernetes, you would have learned it already. You
Happened.
don't want to learn it. You have, it's not about not having time, it's about not having attention. And so I need you to stop beating yourself up because this is obviously something that you don't want to learn. And you're going to be fine in the marketplace without it.
It's also often there's a niche for exactly this opposite, right? So if you don't like Kubernetes or you just somehow not attracted to learning it, you'll be the one who knows how to do stuff without Kubernetes, and eventually someone is going to need this. I had this experience with Python, right? So I got at some point in kind of in the early 2000s into Python, got very, very in love with it. It's still my main language. And at the time, everyone was doing Java, and I hated Java. I still do. I can't stand it. Like I know it's practical. A lot of people do really cool things with it. To me, like I just see like a page of Java code, and like I get fever. Like I hate it.
I'm with you. I get anxiety.
No, like, I didn't get it. I didn't learn. I mean, I know the basics, but I didn't learn enough Java to do anything important. But I got really good at Python. And guess what? It worked really well for me because Python became a super important language. And so, yeah, don't try to time the market. Have fun. That's the important message here, I think.
And I've had a large amount of fun building that Connect 4, and I'm building something now where I have the LLM generating queries because most of the data you're working with isn't content, it's in a database. And so I'm experimenting now with this idea of somebody being able to ask a question about things that are literally in a SQL table as opposed to written content. And how well can we do that? And how much information does the person asking the question need related to what the data looks like? Right. So these are the things that I'm sort of experimenting now. Eventually on that Ardan Labs AI, I'll have a demo for that as well. I think that's where things can start to get really interesting. If you could create a universe, if the only UI your team ever had was a chat sort of app, you would never have to write a UI again because essentially everything that you need from questions about data, graphs, this could all happen through the simple question, right? And so, how much dev time would companies save if they never had to write another front end again, right?
Another thing, which really this has been kind of my crusade for the last year, even longer. Think of it as a universal function, right? It's like it's a function that takes a string and returns a string, but it's a pretty powerful function, right? It can do everything. And so, what if the only function you need is an LLM? If you never have to write another function, another class, another module, because you have this magic, the Joker function that does everything. And it's not quite there yet, but it's very, very close.
It is close for definitely a dozen types of problems at this point. But to me, that's almost like the hey Google with that device. Hey Google, play, or hey Google, do, right? I mean, there's an aspect to that magic box too that can, now they're able to translate the hey question to a set of API calls, right? And there's some work there, I guess. But I'm with you. It's going to get, I'm just glad, Eleanor, I'm 55 and I'm aging out because I enjoyed the last 35 years of writing code and software and figuring out these problems. And I just don't know if eventually that magic function is going to really eliminate a lot of the need to have the level of engineering I've had to sort of teach and employ to build systems that could grow and stay solid.
I think it's quite, we are in a pretty unique position. Maybe we're kind of the last generation who did build by hand. Because we could tell kind of stories about how it was when you wrote code. You wrote the code for the computer, what to do. This was such a strange thing. Maybe this is never going to happen anymore. I'm pretty sure that's actually where things are going.
Gonna get interesting. And so now you're at Microsoft. You're focused on their AI offerings, and you get you have a first class seat at the to the future right now, which is
It's
amazing.
great. The last couple of years have been breathless. It's just non-stop. It's like every day something new, especially working with startups again, because they're kind of early adopters, startup software developers. They were the first to pick this up and kind of see what can we do with it. It's amazing. I'm having an amazing time.
Yeah, and your story is amazing. And I'm going to say it again to you. You got to be good to get lucky. So whether we understand how that good is coming from, you're good. I mean, and that's why these opportunities were always there.
Sure. And I think the other thing is you gotta love being an imposter. So if anyone tells you like, oh, I'm suffering from imposter syndrome, there's this expression, this poetic expression, the beginner's mind, right? The Zen beginner's mind. It's the same thing. Imposter syndrome and beginner's mind are the same thing with a sort of slightly different wording. Love it, enjoy it, because you don't want to be the one who already knows everything. That's boring.
Yeah, embrace your imposter syndrome. That's it. I love it. All right, this was we're out of time. This was an amazing conversation. I really appreciate you sharing this time with us. We'll put it in the show notes, but if somebody wanted to reach out and ask a question after listening to the show, what's the best way for someone to reach out?
So you can go to my website. It's like a contact page with everything. There's email. I'm on like X and Blue Sky and Threads and whatnot. I'm very accessible. GitHub, obviously. So yeah, do get in touch. I love meeting new fellow travelers.
Yay. Okay, so we'll have that in the show notes. All right. Well, this is the Ardan Labs podcast signing off with Eleanor and Bill, and we hope to see everybody again real soon.